Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Kusuma. I am the founder and chairman of the board of Symplast. We are a top-notch software company that offers cutting-edge mobile technology products to the aesthetic industry. And we are doing this podcast in the hopes of sharing a lot of the exciting developments in the aesthetic society at large or the aesthetic industry at large. We are very privileged today to have Dr. Kiya Movassaghi join us from Oregon. He is the current president of the Aesthetic Society, formerly known as the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons. He is embarking on a very arduous task and very noble task of trying to bring the aesthetic industry up to speed in what's happening from the Aesthetic Society perspective. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things today. It's a casual conversation. It's going to involve, the plans that Dr. Movassaghi has for the Aesthetic Society and the aesthetic industry at large. He's embarking on a long tour to talk to many states and many countries, for that matter, about what's happening. We want to talk about the evolution of the aesthetic industry and what's the foreseeable future look like from his perspective and the Aesthetic Society perspective, the new initiatives they're going to launch. And so it's going to be a long discussion about a lot of these interesting things that's going to be of interest to the society and the plastic surgery aesthetic industry at large. We also have Facundo, the CEO and CTO of Symplast, who's going to be joining us as well. So with that said, do you guys want to say a few words before we get started, Dr. Movassaghi?
Of course, I want to thank Shashi and Facundo for inviting me to do this podcast. I'm excited to share some of the exciting things, the initiatives that we have taken on this year during my presidency and where we are with that process and where I think we need to go into the future, because I think it's an exciting time, but at the same time, challenging time in the aesthetic space. And we need to make sure that we adapt to all the new changes. So thank you very much for inviting me.
It's our honor. Looking forward to our conversation. Facundo, do you have any words to share with the audience?
Thank you, Shashi. Thank you, Kiya, for joining us. It certainly is a pleasure to have you with us. Met you several times in the different meetings. I'm excited to hear what you have to say on the road towards joining the society as a president, but I'm sure that you have previous experiences as well with the society and all the different efforts that they are doing. I think that the recent changes on opening up are fantastic, and I'm really excited to hear more about it.
Let's do it.
So let me kick it off, Dr. Movassaghi, Kiya. So the first question I obviously have is about the name. So the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons recently renamed itself as the Aesthetic Society. Tell the audience, what was the reasons behind it? What is the plan with it?
That's a very good question, Shashi, because, if you go back and historically where we started, it was in 1967 that a small group of surgeons got together in a restaurant in Italy and decided that we needed a group of folks to a journal club and come together and discuss aesthetic topics. But then we realized over the course of years that the specialty grew and became stronger. And then we decided to change the name from a small journal club to Aesthetic Society, and has changed names a few times. But it was recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, that we did recognize that the aesthetic space is changing. And it's not just about the aesthetic plastic surgeons, but rather it's about the aesthetic medicine and surgery. So we want to be more of a encompassing society that can capture both the surgical and non-surgical and be everything about aesthetics. Hence the name change to the Aesthetic Society.
So how is this being received by the industry? Is it something that naturally was accepted, or is there some marketing that has to be done for that name to stick around? Because when you say an aesthetic society, clearly in the industry, it seems like a generic name, which I think is the idea as you just shared with us. So how do you brand it so that it stands out in the crowded space of the aesthetic societies that are blooming up everywhere?
Of course, it's been around. The name has been around now for a few years. but it's just obviously the name is a symbolic gesture, right? From the external viewpoint. But what's important is what we do with the name change, what comes after that, what we are accomplishing. And that's what's going to register with the space and with the industries. So yes, Aesthetic Society is good. And people are referring to us now as the Aesthetic Society. And when you say the Aesthetic Society, most people in the space know who you're talking about. With our international colleagues, they still refer to us as ASAPs. But the international kind of lags behind what happens in the U.S. market. But in terms of the implication of the name change, we realize that, okay, we changed the name, but what else goes with that? The name change was because of the changes in the market and aesthetic space. The market was no longer just the surgeons delivering care to the patients, but there's a whole layer of other providers that are entering this market and is growing so rapidly every day. So it's what comes with the name change. So that's why we, at the board level, at the leadership, we decided that it was time to change who we are as a society. We're no longer just a group of plastic surgeons talking about surgical topics. Rather, we are a group of aesthetic providers talking about all aesthetic topics, surgical and non-surgical. So that's what has kind of transpired in the past 12 months, especially the last 4 or 5 months since I become the president. We're really working on this to move this forward, and I'm looking forward to discuss that in more details, but in terms of some of the initiatives that we've taken on.
So when you say providers, who are you including in that group? Is it other subspecialty surgeons? Is it aestheticians? Are they nurse practitioners, nurses? What is the group of providers that you want to incorporate within this society?
Right. The fastest growing segment of the market is the non-surgical. So the non-surgical, it involves your injectors, your estheticians, your nurses, nurse practitioners, also your business part of your practice. That's the part that's really growing the fastest. If you look at the statistics and the projections for the next several years, is going to increase by double digits, 12%, 13% for the non-surgical, whereas the surgical segment is going to increase by about 2%. So that's where the fastest growth of the market is taking place. Yes, we are opening our society to all the core specialists. So by core, I mean facial plastics, dermatology, oculoplastics as well. So those are the colleagues that we want to work and collaborate with because I think together we are stronger. But we kind of cover the surgical side. But the part that really has been my focus this year has been what I call the ally pro, or the ally professionals. These are all the professionals who are allied with a delivery of the aesthetic care. So we want to incorporate all those folks into our society so that we can provide the same level of education and excellence as we, the surgeons, have been accustomed to for so many decades. You and I have been getting the best education from the Aesthetic Society, but this group of folks are not getting the same level of education consistently and reliably. So we are going to be this source in the future for this group of allied professionals.
What I liked is that you guys went ahead and rebranded the society a little bit ahead of actually launching all these new initiatives. So you gave the market enough time to adopt the name, and now moving on to this new approach of more inclusiveness. So I love that.
Facundo, the change always does. It's not easy, right? I mean, you in your own personal experience, your own personal life, my own practice. If I want to change to a new system or a new device or whatever it is, it's not easy. But once you adopt it and you realize the benefits of it, then you say, okay, I can't believe I was doing it the old way for so long. It's the same thing here. It has taken some time and persuasion to convince, starting with our own family, our own plastic surgeons, to convince them that the name change. And then from there to convince them that we need to welcome our core colleagues. And then from there, now we're opening up to the Ally Pro. And again, we have to convince and persuade why we're doing this. If you look at the mission statement of our society, the first line says, the society was created for the sake of improving the science and art of delivering safe and good outcomes to the patients, both for surgery and aesthetic medicine. So that's our mission. We're in the business of education, and we should do everything. We did a very good job for so many years for our surgeons. Now we've got to do the same job for Ally Pro, because we all, in the rising tide, come
Love
up.
it. Love it.
So the Allied Professionals, the new brand and the new name that's been given to this collaborative, inclusive organization, is this something that has an educational arm to it as part of the ongoing education, like you said? And are you doing it in-house, or are you trying to partner with all the associated organizations and maybe educational centers? One comes to mind, I think there's a very good friend of mine, Dr. Joseph Russo, who is launching something called a MAP meeting. And I think Aesthetic Society has a partnership with that, I believe. And he's also big into education. And we did a podcast recently with him, and he's also very worried about having a lot of things that go with education: safety, compliance, oversight, regulation, all of those things that are part of the education. So tell us about, you're the president now. You have, I think, another 5, 6 months, 7 months to go, it looks like, and you have a lot of work ahead of you. So how are you looking at this from an education perspective? Because we hope to share this not just with surgeons, but with all of the audience that you're talking about.
That's excellent, Shashi. It is a multi-pronged approach. So we, as you said, I've kind of embarked on this process, and the Ally Professional is actually a new category of membership. So it's not an organization by itself. It's a new level of membership for the society. For instance, I've signed up my Ally Pro for the program, and they all receive a certificate with their names on it, and it says Ally Pro, member of the Aesthetic Society. So with that already comes a level of prestige. That means if you're an Ally member of the society, that means that's where you're going to get your education. And if you get your education from there, that's what we know is going to be a very trusted source of education. So it's valuable. But in terms of short-term, long-term plans, short-term, obviously, we're at the infancy level. We were just scratching the surface of this process. And we're at the 300 members in 3 or 4 months that I've taken office. And my goal is to get 1,000 members by the end of my term, and then it's going to exponentially grow beyond that as we establish this program. But it's a 3-pronged approach. First prong is membership. So we got to get this message out there that there is this level of membership, that there's actually a potential for any Ally Pro who's out there in an island by themselves. They can become and join a very prestigious society and belong to a society. Right now, most of them don't have a home. So you see a lot of these little meetings and educational things pop up here and there, but there's no continuity. There's no structure to it. Some of them are good, some of them are not. So number one, membership. Number two, we're going to create a sense of community so that these folks can belong to and they can communicate with each other. They can share cases with each other, perhaps establish a level of a sort of a process of mentorship with some of the other people in the group, and what we call ambassadors. And the third prong is going to be the education, is the delivery of education and a certification process that comes with it. Certification is going to come later, right? Because you have to first educate these folks before we can talk about certification. But eventually, that's where we need to go. That yes, Shashi is an Ally Pro member of the Aesthetic Society, and Shashi has done this courses, and therefore he gets these badges and he get a little certificate. Now, how rigid or strict you want to make this certification process? Is it going to have any legal implications or not? I mean, those are questions to be answered in the future. Obviously, a lot goes into, as you know, from our own board of plastic surgery, a lot goes into that process to have that kind of a legality to it. But at the minimum, you can have a level of badges or certificate that, hey, you're a level 3 of the certificate process. Then we can also collaborate with some of the existing organizations that have already done some of this work. And I think there's going to be a lot of this back and forth. We've already had a lot of conversations, not to mention any specific names right now because we were at the early conversations. But we've had a lot of these conversations with other organizations that have done part of this certificate process and see how we can collaborate so we can help them and they can help us, and it will be a win-win situation. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel from the beginning. But we have, in the process of education, we have established what we call the Aesthetic Society Academy, which is a digital platform, has a lot of content already, but we're going to keep adding content to it. And we just actually had our aesthetic or the Ally Pro committee meeting a couple of nights ago. This is a committee that we just established this year, and I assigned multiple committee members to it that represents the entire aesthetic space. We have plastic surgeons, we have facial plastics, dermatology. We're going to have oculoplastics. We have 2 nurse practitioners who are well known, and then we're going to keep growing this committee. But we just had a meeting and we talked about some of the webinars that we're going to establish. We had our reimagination. We're also going through a whole reimagination of education this year, not just for the non-surgeons, but also for the surgeons. We had a meeting last week in San Diego, and we are talking about how are we going to deliver education. Again, with all these challenges come opportunities, right? So we have to learn how to adapt to the new environment. You cannot do what you did 10 years ago and expect the same outcome. It's just not reality anymore. Things have changed. The new generation is coming up with a different background. Their access to digital platforms and how they learn is different than how you and I learned when we were residents and went through surgical training. So we also need to adapt to that new era. How do we deliver? So we have talked about doing some webinars and different type of cases and monthly webinars, different things to deliver education. We also decided that there's going to be 5 tracks of Ally Pro. There's going to be a business track, devices, injectables, skincare, and health and wellness. Those are all the areas of the non-surgical topics that are growing. So we need to address all of those. So to me, I could not ask for a better time and a more challenging time to be a president, because I feel like the work that we're doing right now is laying the foundation for foreseeable future for the next 5 to 10 years of the aesthetic space.
Yeah, there are so many questions that come to mind. So let me just pick off. First thing is we're going to talk about technology because, Symplast is, after all, a technology company, and how we are thinking about this, and we'd love to engage with you on that dialogue. But you talked about, wellness space. Wellness includes, some medical care, like weight loss management is a lot of medical care that has, subsequent surgical or non-surgical aesthetic treatments that may be necessary, but it's mostly medical care. Hormone replacement therapy, or like you said, some other aspects of nutrition, perhaps, etc. So, are you opening it up to non-procedural or non-surgical based specialties as well, like internal medicine or family practice folks that do this, or rehab people that are doing this? So, is it that broad of a scope?
We're not there right now. I think, as I said, we're just scratching the surface of this, and I think as we dive into this more and more, we are going to recognize and realize many other opportunities, many areas where we can collaborate. Again, we just have to take it one step at a time. Right now, we are working on the foundation of just the non-physicians part. Let's work on that part first. And then we'll go through our annual meeting and then reassess where we are, get the feedback, and then start growing the program. And the program is going to continue to grow. As the program grows, then we can address other elements. We, in fact, just hired a project manager who's going to focus on this aspect of the society. So on the membership part of it, on the marketing part of it, on the education part of it, to coordinate all these activities, because it is a lot of activities. And you cannot believe how many emails and phone calls I go back and forth to make sure all these things are happening. But as I said, it's exciting, but at the same time, it's a lot of challenging days ahead of us. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a concerted effort, but it's going to take an organization that's focused and is good at educating. And that's who we are. The way I envision this, I used to, say that, we were the top of the market 5-10 years ago. There was We were the king of the world, right? There was nobody who could come close to us because everything was surgical at that point. Even back then, Botox was only done by surgeons. Fillers were only done by surgeons if we did it. That market changed. And if you think the market is still the same, is we're fooling ourselves. But the problem is right now, if you look at the market, and I'm sure you've seen the same thing, it's wild, wild west. Is anybody's guess. My PA, before I hired her 2 years ago, she told me that she used to take a course in Houston, Texas on a weekend, go somebody's office and learn a few things about injections. That's not education. And that what we're seeing is actually we're getting feedback from the industry. When we talk about Ally Pro, now we just recently met in San Diego. When we talk to we talk about Ally Pro to all of our industry partners, without exception, the eyes get big. They want to say, tell us more about this. Because everybody understands that's the future, and everybody's been looking for a leader in the market, and that leader doesn't exist right now. And now that we are telling everybody we want to take that leadership role again, so right now everybody's on the same level. We want to convert back into a pyramid, with us at the top of the pyramid and everybody below us. And there are tiers of providers that can be below us. And maybe at some point will be the internist who's doing the health and wellness programs. They can be below us and part of this organization because they bring something to the table that will be valuable. And I know a lot of my colleagues who have already developed the hormonal and weight loss programs in their spas. They have hired internists to run those programs because you need it. So I think there's a lot to be done, but the key is, the concept is we need to take leadership. And by that, we need to figure out how we can educate everybody so we to rise the bar for everybody and the tide goes up. The last thing we need is having complications in the market that somebody else is going to come and regulate it. Let's do it ourselves. And the industry has been very supportive and they're excited and they want to spread the word and hopefully we grow this program, but in collaboration with everybody.
This warms my heart because this brings back a memory of my own. I trained at the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, and I finished my training in 2006. I was a young junior attending there, and the very first time in the history of the Cleveland Clinic, I said, we need to have an injectable day, like as a day that we, invite the community to come and just, all of us just do injections. This was back in 2007. And I remember very few people being interested in it who are my colleagues and even administration at the time. But, as a young surgeon at the time, I remember we have to be part of this. And I remember driving down another time very, soon after that with Dr. Russo down the street. And we were already noticing so many spas coming up. And we were having a conversation just like you said. It's the wild, wild west. I don't know who's overseeing this. I don't know who's regulating this. I don't know what kind of training they're going to have and all this. And we've ceded so much territory as, the core plastic surgeons, as aesthetic surgeons over a number of years, because like you said, we focused on surgery. And while all of this was happening underneath our noses, and it's so good to see that we finally, although a little bit late, realized our weakness or oversight and finally taking charge of becoming a more organized structural education, like you said, and certification and oversight. So going to education, Kiya, so are you envisioning in-person courses? Or are you envisioning webinar, a hybrid of both? And is it going to be a year-long process? Because what comes to mind is AMSPA. AMSPA has courses on a monthly basis. A lot of that is didactic, legal, and things of that nature, how to run a business. From a procedural perspective, are you thinking of those tracks in-person courses?
Right. I think it's going to be both. It's going to be, so for the immediate future, we have our injectable course. We call it Behind the Syringe, the Beauty of Injectables. That's we had it for the past 4 years, under a different name. But this year, we changed the name, we changed the content, we changed the faculty. So the faculty is cross-representative of the entire aesthetic space. So we have nurse practitioners, facial plastics, derm and plastics teaching the course. And also we have Dr. Facundo, who's the very famous anatomist. He's going to actually do the anatomy teaching. So it's going to be virtual with live injections for 3 or 4 hours, I think. That's going to be in January. So you'll be the audience will be at home, but all live injections will be in the studio broadcasted, and then with the anatomy dissection. So it's going to be very, very powerful program. And then in Austin, where our annual meeting is going to take place March 20th through 23rd. Is what we call the meet. Is the place where you come to meet people. Is the place where things are going to happen. That's why we changed the name now. And it's going to happen a month earlier than our usual annual meeting. But in that meeting, we also have 3 days worth of courses. So for the business, injections, skincare, all of those is going to be covered in those 3 days during the annual meeting. So that will be in-person meeting, and we'll cadaver courses and all that. And then we're going to have another injectable course, virtual course, again, similar to the January one in June. So that will be 2 of them. And I think with this group of folks, we're going to need to have like weekly or monthly other courses that they can access on their own time. Because of this Aesthetic Society Academy that we've generated, it's going to have a lot of content. So we can release the content one topic at a time. Just like, for instance, what Symcast has done or Allergan Academy has done in the past. We just, like, let's say, the lip augmentation topic comes up. Because what we found and what we hear from our ambassadors in the space is that this group of folks need a lot more than surgeons do. You and I are so busy doing the operations, we're not ready to do weekly webinars or meetings. But these folks want a lot of education. They love it. And they need some consistency and persistency in delivery of the education. So that's what we're going to be doing a lot of.
Do you foresee a track where perhaps these allied professionals, nurses, nurse practitioners have a separate track altogether called aesthetics in nursing as the part of their nursing education? Do you foresee that? Or do you think it's going to be like we do, where you finish some core training in some general medicine and then specialize?
Yeah, especially interesting you said that. One of the things I mentioned to the aesthetic, the Ally Pro committee when we introduced everybody, and I said, I envision the day that, just like you and I, if we do certain level of training, we get the FACS after our names. So they get maybe Aesthetic Society, something like that after their name. So Allied Pro, so plastic surgery, aesthetic, or APP, something like that. So something like that after their name, that means they have completed a certain amount of coursework. And I think that would be something very valuable, that not only you have the prestige now, you also have credibility. One of the things that one of the very influential nurse practitioner told us during the call is that the Ally Pro are looking for credibility, confidence, and community. Those are the 3 things they're looking for. And that's what the society is going to deliver.
So in along the same vein, so there's going to need to be a lot of like general consumer education for the market, to kind of recognize this change. And are the industries in our space, the big players, are they going to participate and collaborate to bring the whole industry up to this level? And where are those kind of conversations?
I think for this to be successful and get there, obviously we can't do it all on our own. I mean, we're the visionaries here. We're going to put in the work, and we have the infrastructure to provide that opportunity. But at the same time, we need, as you said, we're a little late to the game, right? This market has grown so fast that it's like all of a sudden we're trying to control it. Just for an example, there are 51,000 injectors in U.S. alone.
Wow.
51,000. And I just told you we have 300 members. So it tells you how, and I'm not talking about the estheticians, all the other elements that goes in that space. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I have no doubt that if we put together a quality product that's valuable, that value proposition, like anything else, people will come to it. The word of mouth is, that's why we're going to have these ambassadors, and these ambassadors are the ones who have a lot of social media influence. So they're going to be the spreading the word. We can't do all the marketing on our own, but through the help of the ambassadors, we spread the word. That we have to also create that content that, if Shashi wants to go and become a member, you're going to say, well, I just pay the membership fee. What do I get in return? We have to have a quality product there. So all of these things need to happen at the same time. That's why we haven't gone too crazy with the kind of advertising part of it yet, because we're working on all this foundation so that once we go big with this, people say, oh, wow, this is a great program. I want to belong to that. And then, all the Ally Pro, we're asking, like, they put a video together, go on social media, talk about it. My PA reached out to the PA Association and to advertise about this program. So all the PAs out there who want to specialize in aesthetic plastic surgery to hear it. And they were so excited. So we're going to put a letter together and we're going to send it out to the PA associations. So it's going to take a lot of these groundwork, kind of grassroots efforts to grow this. Industry needs to help us. Industry tells us that, I mean, we had a meeting with Allergan. They said, where were you guys 5 years ago when we asked you to do this? And you said no. And they're right. We said no. Initially, at the time, there was no appetite for it in our specialty. But now we've changed. And the good thing about our society is we're not dogmatic. We're a very pragmatic group of leaders. You know, we have big egos, but at the same time, we see a problem, we're fixers. We don't sit around and think about it. We adapt it very quickly. So we are on the right track.
So let's bring in technology here, because sounds like that's going to be a big part of all of this. So some of the questions around it, Facundo can participate in this part of the conversation. So as far as technology is concerned, how do you envision, like in this wild west, and as a responsible leader, as the president of the Aesthetic Society, which is an enormous responsibility, you're representing all of us, and so how do you envision overseeing this wildly crazy growing market at the grassroots level, like you said? Like, I know the first class hasn't graduated yet, perhaps, or gotten certifications yet, but what kind of technology tools do you think you need? We have some ideas we'll share with you, but what do you think? How can we utilize technology to have real in-office oversight of what's going on so that we make sure that the patient's safety is first and center?
I mean, that's the challenge of the future, is how you monitor. It's like the same how you monitor the surgeons to make sure that they adhere to a certain level of quality. How are you going to do it with a much bigger market? So obviously, that's where people like you guys will come into play to help us with technologies that you think can help us monitor that and, improve the quality of the delivery of the education. I don't know the specifics right now off the top of my head, but definitely technology is the future. I mean, AI is big now, but other aspects of the technology is going to be very important to help us get there.
So here's a segue where Facundo could perhaps share some of the technology we've already developed at Symplast that I think would be interesting for this market to hear about, and we've already actually implemented this in the market. So Facundo, do you want to take a couple of minutes and talk about the oversight?
Yeah. Thank you, Shashi. And what I like is that now the society is focusing on covering the whole patient journey, right? And you were talking about even not just the medical side, but even the administration side and the marketing side, and all that is to run better aesthetic practices, all in all. And that is at the core of our mission, is to make sure that we develop the technology to enable aesthetic plastic surgeons or just aesthetic professionals in general to deliver better results by letting them focus on what they do best, what they are passionate about, that is patient care. So one of the things that very early on we did many years ago before COVID is secure communications of many different sorts, right? And you're used to by now using text message, right? You use text message for so many different things. One of the things that we did is create a HIPAA compliant secure messaging platform, and it's right built into the our own software. But that allows you to communicate with patients, to communicate with colleagues from other practices, and to communicate with your staff members and share either text or even video, live video, recorded video, audio, etc. So those type of communications, a very multimedia approach, it's one of the tools that we developed that we know that it enhances the outcomes by sharing data, by being near real time and allowing people to communicate. And at the same time, maintain privacy and specifically HIPAA compliance, and having all that information become part of the patient file. Additionally, we also created the live video chat, right? Again, HIPAA compliant, nothing new in our lives, and we are doing this remotely, right? But enabling practices and practitioners to do the same thing, to follow up or to do good faith. What's the name? Is the good faith
Exam.
exam? Thank you. So the good faith exam is something that we can do remotely. We have developed technology to allow now the physician to oversee the injectors, where the injectors can ask for an order to proceed after the physician did the good faith exam. And there's a record in the patient file where the physician instructed the injector to do so. And then we also document both the pre procedure and post procedure via either pictures or videos.
I think that's right there. You got my attention. I think, I was on an advocacy call a couple of nights ago, and one of the states requested some funding for their advocacy efforts in their state. And one of the topic was exactly that the state is requiring the injectors now be supervised by a physician. So you can't have a medical director anymore. That's not good enough. You actually have to have a physician present. So this could be the answer, solution to that.
So in Massachusetts, as a matter of fact, Dr. Russo, again, because he's been a pioneer in this, he has an interesting model. He has over 100 nurses, nurse injectors all across that. I think I spoke to you about it. So we created a dashboard for him, almost like a command center, and it's staffed by, like overseers, or you can call them the oversight committee. On the ground level, in any office for that matter that they're working in, they do an exam, they send real-time communication back and forth to this command center, and they can they can request a treatment, and it can be approved or not approved, and suggestions made. If there needs to be, like Facundo said, an immediate assessment by the physician, it can be done immediately. And this is something that's working, and as a matter of fact, his practice is the one and only truly compliant med spa in the whole country at this point. There's no other place in the country that's truly compliant today besides his office, as you said, because many medical directors are off campus, and they're just there to get $1,000, $2,000 a month or something like that as just additional income, and they never oversee anything. And so this is going to be a big challenge for you, Kiya. So I think this is something that we cannot have a nurse even give a Tylenol at the hospital without an order, a physician order, as you know. And, this is people putting needles in patients' faces or on the eyes and everywhere. And so this is something that has to be taken extremely seriously because, like you said, one or two complications away from the industry being regulated by, the legal top dogs, that's going to change this entirely.
Yeah.
And Dr. Russo actually run that by the medical board of the state of Massachusetts to ensure compliance in that way. And we were the technology partner to enable that workflow as Shashi described. Actually, last year in Las Vegas on the first MAP meeting, I made a presentation on how this works and how with Symplast we assist compliance for providers that are off-site via virtual visits. Because at the end of the day, technology in this day and age can ensure patient safety from different angles, right? To make sure that the providers, injectors in this case, are doing it right, supervised by the right level of physician, approving the work that they do, and all that actually documented into the patient file. So then anything and everything can be controlled, who did it, when they did it, and everything. There's a digital footprint that supports the workflows that they are doing.
So another thought here, Kiya, I would like you to consider and hear your thoughts about it. Is there any discussion happening in the Aesthetic Society, Allied Pro component of Aesthetic Society, where you could enable a second opinion, for example, for somebody that can be done remotely? So for a nurse practitioner is doing something in the field, they want to get an expert opinion from someone like you or whoever else, and they want to have an immediacy of that opinion. Is there something like that you can envision happening? Because if you really want to be a leader in this space, we have to innovate. we truly have to innovate. We can't just replicate what has been done before. Like you said, we have to truly be the thought leaders, the innovative leaders, the education leaders, and all of the above. And so, is that something that you think will have any merit in because, like you said, there's a order of expertise, and so if somebody wants to do that, is that something that you guys thought about?
We haven't talked about on the Ally Pro side, but we have been talking about on the surgical side for many, many years. As when I was younger surgeon and then where I am now, the mentorship program has always been a huge part, right? We always talk about, can we have, for the young surgeons, they always have complicated cases. Can we have created a mentorship program? I've had my own aesthetic fellowship program for the past 9 years. So I have an aesthetic fellow who spends a year with me. And to this day, all my 9 fellows, regardless of when they graduate, they still reach out to me and they say, Dr. M, can I send you this picture? They send me a picture of a case and I pick my opinion. Sometimes they just want a reassurance. This is what I want to do, which is exactly what I taught them to do. But I just want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So that's the smaller version of it. But what you're talking about is a much bigger program. But I think eventually that's that sense of community that I was talking about. That if you belong to the society, that this could be a collaboration, a place where, for instance, could be a case alert on this community of allied pros, and you could have physicians, non-physicians on that community, and they can see the case alert. So you can be posting a picture of a complication. Hey, I got this redness here. I'm worried. Do you have any ideas? This is what happened. And people can chime in. I've seen examples of that in some other platforms. I mean, I see that as an example of how we can help the Ally Pro folks. You can also create mentorship program. If you find willing people who say, I'm willing to be a mentor, then perhaps the people can reach out to them. So these are all the thing about innovation you're talking about and forward thinking. I mean, I think I cannot tell you how this education is going to look like in 5 years from now, but I can tell you it's going to be a lot different than how we do it today, both for the surgeons
And
and
I
the
agree
non-surgeons.
on that education and the community, right? The sense of community. That is something that within our clients, we have put together a solution that also allows them to communicate, even if they're in different clinics, where they can share that. And Shashi can certainly elaborate on that. But what I'm very interested is that you guys are dreaming about that, right? And that is the kind of thing that we have been doing for quite a while. And I would love to look at different partnerships that we can do to make your dreams a reality.
You just said innovation. I was just actually going to, after this call, I'm going to go change the bylaws and change it from a presidential thing to a monarchy. I'm going to make a monarchy. I'll be the king. I'll be doing this for the next 10 years. And then my son will follow me. But seriously, I just feel like there's so much I can think of that I love to do. If I had endless amount of time that I want to accomplish, but I have very confident that future leaders coming after me will follow my footsteps of what I've worked on and kind of bring the platform up, and they keep building on this with the help of all our industry colleagues. Really, it's going to take it's going to take a village to do this. Mm-hmm. But as long as we all have we all have the same vision, that we see first of all, we see the importance and the need for it, and then collaborate on how to make it better. And every player in this market can bring something to this. Obviously we kind of create the space for it, or the kind of the conduit, but we need the help from everybody to chime in, in technology, innovations, connections with the injectors, the products, safe, all these things, regulations, certificate, all those elements that can come together under this umbrella of the aesthetic society. That's how I envision it being 5 years from now.
King Kiya, I just want to say I'll be your general. I'll be right next to you.
Yeah. Can you share a little more on the things that you do within the app, where you actually created your own community within a few other surgeons from other clinics?
Yeah, so what a big part, like you, that drives me as a physician, and that's why I founded this company Symplast, is innovation. I just never ever accepted status quo in my life ever. And so one of the things that we are very proud of is exactly the mentorship program that you talk about. So imagine, Kiya, where residents graduate, fellows graduate. And Cleveland Clinic residents in Florida come work with me, and we have a nice community here as well. And we all enjoy that part of it, because giving back teaching is what also gives me a tremendous amount of pride and pleasure. And so we have today the capability that can be offered, like today, like right now, where we have what we call cross-tenant chat feature. Essentially what that is essentially exactly that peer-to-peer network that's secure and that's private. So for example, you could give all of your fellows, the 9 fellows, and create a community within the Symplast ecosystem and say, these are Dr. Kiya Movassagi's fellows. And all of them are now connected privately and securely with you and with each other. And all of you can communicate readily about anything and everything you want. You can create a committee for financial best practices, marketing best practices, clinical best practices, non-surgical best, whatever it is. And that can happen today. So I created a network of my own, of my peers, in plastic surgery community, and they're all surgeons from all over the country. And we use it to share cases, just like you said, and communicate with each other now without the fear of anything going outside of the ecosystem, which has been tremendous community building as well. And so imagine all of the extenders, the nurse practitioners also doing the same thing as peer-to-peer community that you talk about. And that doesn't have to have any dream, because this dream has been dreamt and it's already available today to be utilized by the entire society. And we'd love to talk to you as the president, as the monarch, as the king, to see how we can really utilize this in education. And when they probably come to the course or the event, they can be given this app or a tool to immediately have the community. The minute they leave, they already have the community in their pocket. So that's one thing that we're already doing. But going back to more discussion here, what other initiatives are you as the president embarking on for the rest of the year? Because I know you said you have a lot of travel coming up. Is that partly education? Is that partly growing the Allied Pro? What else are you doing?
So we are growing our education, not education, but our relationship with the international colleagues. I think that's one area where we kind of didn't pursue as strongly as we should have. And again, part of it was because everybody came to us. So we were accustomed to be the only player in town, and now we realize the world is flat and is growing, and there are so many other end players. And we need to reach out to our colleagues and collaborate with our colleagues, learn from them, teach them, educate, and go back and forth between the meetings. So we have started a lot of conversations with many of the societies in other countries, many other organizations, and we have signed, and I think up to now 29 memorandum of understandings, MOUs, where we collaborate, and there's kind of a reciprocal benefits to both, and they get the advantage of using our journal, the ASJ, which is the #1 journal in aesthetic plastic surgery, and other benefits come to our meeting at a discounted number amounts, and then we can go to their meetings and educate. So they have invited me to go to many meetings. And just to give you an example, my itinerary for the next 6-7 weeks between now and Christmas, I'm leaving this weekend for Australia. So I'm going to Australia, Brazil, then I go to China, then I go to Kuwait, Miami, and Montreal. This is all before Christmas. And then after Christmas, I've got 6 of them after. I'll go to India, I'm going to Mexico, Paris, Park City, Hawaii, and then I finish my term in Austin, Texas. So the travel is extensive, but they invite me and I go and give talks. But also, I think there's a great value in human relationship. All the relationships start with a handshake. You can't assume people can just come to you because you're president of the Aesthetic Society. Who cares, right? It's that handshake, that human contact. Like you and I met last week in person, and here we are talking on the podcast, and I already feel great, even though you didn't invite me to your community. Thank you very much, Shashi. But, we establish relationships. So all these things starts with a handshake. And I think it's very important for the president who represents the society to go to these meetings. Now, I can't go to all of them. So if I'm not able to go to one, I send one of my colleagues on the board to attend that meeting. But that's what we're doing. That's one of the initiatives I've got this year. Beside the Ally Pro is the initiative of increasing our international growth and reach. And that's been very successful. The other initiative that's very important to me is reimagination of the education. So I put a group together called Education Reimagined. Already the Austin meeting is going to look a lot different than what we had in the past. It's a much more inclusive, more vibrant meeting. We changed the name to The Meet, and you're going to come and see and for yourself and see how wonderful it's going to be and different from before. The panels are going to be cross representations from all the core specialists. We have nurse practitioners, we have facial plastic, everybody, of course, working within their own scope of practice. And then the other initiative is not only changing the way we deal with the outside world, but also how we govern ourselves. I think our governance is outdated. It was built based on, 15 years ago, and we done these amendments and patch up work, but we need to modernize. And I recognize that when I became the president, that all these committees that I was assigning people to had no meanings, there had no communications, no structure to it. And I'm changing that. I've already changed that, and how we do delivery on the board calls, so it's much more meaningful. And I'm keeping everybody who is a volunteer leader accountable. So if you really want to be part of this process, you got to be accountable. You got to do something, or just don't do it. So we're doing that. We're also looking at our governance, and we have an agency who's helping us to modify our governance, and hopefully there will be some changes to come on that. So those are my big items that I'm doing. Then the other initiative was.
Before you go on, may I make a suggestion? I mean, I guess,
Yeah, go ahead.
do you think 1 year is too short a time? Because this is a lot of work that needs some momentum with one leadership without too much hassle. And so, is that something that you are open to have it extend for another year? Do you have the energy to do so? Is there an openness for that?
I
Well,
think,
he
the
already
regular.
commented that that's it. He's the monarch, and he's not
Yeah,
coming out.
I think, I'm Persian, so Persians are kind of used to monarchy, right? But it's, I think, I think it's good for having new faces and new eyes on it, so long as we work in concert. You know, in the past, I've been on the board for 13 years now. And in the past, I saw some of our previous presidents, again, back then, things were different, right? It was a mom and pop kind of society. Kind of every president would come in and would take on one thing, and it was their signature move and move on. I'm not looking at, I said it from the beginning, I'm not looking at it as such. I'm looking at kind of a reboot year. This was a reboot year in all the elements that I just outlined. How we do education, we reimagine education, we reimagine our governance, we reimagine our membership, we reimagine the aesthetic space. So all this reimagination took place, and all started last year when I had the executive retreat, and that was my meeting, and we came up with these concepts. So, but I'm glad to tell you that the president coming after me, Dr. Tracy Pfeiffer, she is in line with everything I'm doing, and she and I have like almost weekly call. So we are in concert. So it's not like she's going to do something different that I'm starting, and also on top of that, we hired one of the best CEOs that we could ever hire to take over the society and help us go to the next level. You met Mr. Mark Tice in San Diego. He's a wonderful person, but more importantly, wonderful mind. He comes, and when we hired him, we wanted somebody from outside the medical association. Everybody knows how to run a medical association. That's not what we needed. We needed reimagination. And he is helping us to reimagine ourselves, how to run a business, run it like a business, not like a mom and pop society. And we have a COO now, chief operative officer. So we are looking at our financials differently. Everything in the society is really going through a reimagination phase. And that's why I'm so excited that I'm the president. I can. Everybody's not gonna remember what I did, but they're gonna say he was the reimagination president. That's who I
Very
am.
good. I got to have a very good conversation, or several conversations, but also one during a podcast recording in Vancouver in the last meeting with Mark. One of the things that I really loved from that change, the aesthetic society rebranding, the hiring a CEO that comes from hospitality and from a business with a business mindset. I thought that it was a brilliant move, because at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, that patient journey, it is hospitality. Yes, it's in the shape of, or the core is medical hospitality, but it is hospitality where you're delivering for for your patients that you're caring for.
You know, you probably see in the medical internal medicine in space is changing dramatically. My internist now is a concierge doctor now.
Exactly.
They started that whole thesis. It's about hospitality. So it's how you care for your patients in a different mindset than, oh, I have a sick person coming in, take these pills and go away. No, it's a journey, as you said, Facundo, very well, is learning that process. And, you know, when I was on the committee when we hired Mark, and going into that process that we were looking for a new CEO, we were not thinking about a hospitality person. We were just thinking, oh, we're just going to be out of there. So but when we went through the process and interviewed different people, we had several very good candidates, but Mark just stood out. I mean, initially we looked at his resume and like, oh gosh, this guy doesn't even know medicine, doesn't even know HIPAA violations. But when we talked to him and his visions, he said, that's exactly what we need to take us, help us get there. And that's why, you know, this, again, the reimagination process, it takes different thinking, different mindsets. Like you guys are in the technology sector and you're always on, as you say, you're not happy with status quo. You're always thinking of how can I do it better? How can I do it better? Well, you have to.
And it's not just for the technology's sake. It's not for the technology's sake. And we see the same way. Recently, I read a book that it was very unrelated to software and what we do, but it's called Unreasonable Hospitality. And it's how a very famous restaurateur went and created one of the best experiences for diners, right? And we try to apply those concepts around hospitality, around how do we make the patient feel extremely welcome and well taken care of while they're going through their aesthetic journey. And that is not only for us to develop in the software feature sets that we focus on ensuring that those patients enjoy that journey, but also to give you guys time to do what you do best and what you are passionate about. Is unburden you from all the commerce of doing business and actually let you do medicine and make people feel great about themselves, either in a surgical way or non-surgical way. But regardless, ensuring that we provide an upgraded patient journey.
So if you don't mind, Kiya, I'd like to switch topics just a tiny little bit, and it's important for me to, or the audience to hear your perspective. Going on the theme of the wild west in the aesthetic industry, and with the rampant explosion of technology and all those things, it is really distorting patient expectations and marketing, as you probably can relate to. What are your thoughts on? Is there any thoughts that your leadership and the Aesthetic Society leadership can impart to the marketing ethics and principles on how to market or not to market, and is that something that's feasible in today's?
To market to what can you elaborate?
Like the ethics of marketing, to kind of manage the technology, and because it's becoming insane what you're seeing out on many outlets, technology outlets like social media. Is there any leadership that we can show in that arena as well?
That's a tough one. We have a ethics committee, so members can reach out to the ethics committee with any complaints about violations of the ethics. We obviously want to uphold ourselves as the most ethical group of healthcare providers because that's who we are. We always strive for excellence. By the same time, we live in a tough area where the social media has taken over the marketing, and everybody claims everything on the social media. Unfortunately, it's not about your number of peer reviews that you get on your article that you publish. It's about the number of clicks that you get and likes that you get on your social media website. The other day, people are advertising certain procedures and certain names that I have never heard of. And the patients, oh yeah, I saw it on social media. Do you perform that procedure? I'm the president of the society. I've never seen this presentation in my life, but somebody's out there came up with a name. I do a lot of facelifts in my practice, and I spent half an hour the other day with a patient. After half an hour to explaining in details what I'm going to do exactly, the technique that actually is just going to accept it for publication, she said, so is that a deep plane facelift? I'm like, I just explained it. That's the term that she had learned from the social media. So I can't blame the patient. but that's the reality that we live in. And I'm not sure how we're going to change that. I mean, I don't think we as a society have the power or the bandwidth to deal with that. I mean, I think my hope is that we teach our members enough ethics and quality of care that overall will improve the delivery of good outcomes and safe outcomes to our patients.
So basically, honor code is what you think at this point?
I think it's really honor code. I mean, when you, as you've gone through it too, when you get up to sit for your boards, they scrutinize everything you do from your social media, advertising, marketing. I remember back then it was Yellow Pages when I applied for a board, but but beyond that, I mean, how are you going to advertise? Now, just an example. There was a surgeon in a state that will mention the name was advertising that he was saving thousands of lives by doing en bloc capsulectomy for breast implant patients because of the patient had BII. Okay. And we know from the great research that we have performed at the Aesthetic Society, the Aesthetic Society Foundation supported that research. And then Dr. Caroline Glickman and Pat McGuire did a great research, 4 papers published, peer-reviewed prospective studies that shows that you don't need to do en bloc resection if you have a BII. And a lot of those patients, just taking the implants out, the symptoms got better. So we got a complaint from a doctor and came to us, and we actually collaborated with our sister society, ASPS, their president, myself, and a couple other people, and reported this doctor to the board of the state that he was from. And he got the notice from the board that what he was doing was unethical. And then he's responded to us, apologizing. He took everything down on his website. I mean, that's the kind of market we live in. But that's just one example. But unfortunately, there are people who take advantage of patients and do what things for themselves. But I'm hoping that in big picture, overwhelming majority of us, practice ethical and good medicine. That's who we are at the end of the day. We are doctors.
That's wonderful. On that note, I think perhaps we can end today's conversation. I think we covered a lot. We covered your presidency, your initiatives, the Allied Pro Society, our Allied Pro organizational growth, the collaboration with multiple ancillary specialties that we work with. We talked about marketing. We talked about technology. We talked about a bunch of stuff. I think this is wonderful. I think one of the things that I would advocate and I would hopefully request to leaders like you is that we talk to each other a lot, as physicians, peer-to-peer at meetings. I do think we have to go directly to the consumer and talk to the patients directly, to the market. And I think these type of podcasts between 2 physicians and a CEO of a company, technology company, is great, and we can learn from it. But this is the type of conversation that should be broadcast to the consumer so they can hear directly from us. And we have to go like the pharma did. And I don't like the pharma direct-to-consumer model, but I think physicians talking to consumers, patients directly is a wonderful thing to do. So I hope we can have more conversations like this every time there's a new initiative. I would love to be part of that conversation and send it out to the consumers, not just the physician groups.
100% agree. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time today, inviting me for this podcast and share what I'm doing for the year. And I hope, I leave the society in a better place, our society and the specialty in a better place than when I took it 4 or 5 months ago. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Totally agree.
We wish you well for the rest of the year, much success, and we are your partners here at Symplast, and we'd love to collaborate with you. On that, I will say goodbye to King Kiya.
We'll keep that kingdom amongst ourselves, but yeah, I think 1 year is plenty. It's a lot of work.
We'll most definitely see you in Austin.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing you guys. I maybe in any of these meetings I'm going to. I hope one of you guys there.
Well, you're welcome. We're going to meet in Miami when you're here. We are here in Miami, Fort Lauderdale area.
For the GAC meeting?
Yeah. We're going to be a Global Aesthetics. Yep.
Yes. I'm giving a few talks there, and my good friend Dr. Randy Wallman invited me. I went to the facial plastic meeting as a keynote speaker in March in Orlando, and so we have a great relationship with, a lot of the folks in that outside of plastic surgery. So I think collaboration and being together makes us all stronger.
Certainly.
on that note. Have a great evening.
Thank you, guys.
Very good.
Bye bye.